It's right around 11:30 p.m. on Tuesday, September 26th. And I've actually just had a pretty good evening, in spite of having had a crazy day and an all-nighter where I got like an hour and a half of sleep and then was just too encumbered with everything I needed to do to make it to a court case this afternoon, where I was the plaintiff. So it was, up to me whether or not to move forward with the case or just vacate it and then start it again later at a different time. But there's been, like, I don't date because I'm not interested in 99.99% of what's out there anyway. But I don't date because the universe has a way of throwing some really intense connections across my path when I don't expect them or even want them. And the connection is usually so intense that it supersedes and transcends all of the, crazy situations that might be arising around it or from it. This has happened half a dozen times over the last 10 years where I've suddenly found myself with this really intense, two-way connection. It's never just one way. Otherwise, it's an obsession, not a connection, with men who were on the other side of some kind of political issue or a political divide where you're looking at the situation going, I don't know, dude, but this doesn't look too great for, any possible long-term prospects, right? There's been a number of those situations over the last 10 years. And you start looking at the situation going, what is the meaning of all this anyway? Because if I'm going to be in a connection with this person, who's from the other side of the tracks, basically, or on the wrong side of some issue, then what's the point? And right now I'm in a situation like that currently. And you're sort of dealing with this Romeo and Juliet kind of setting where you're from two very different sides of an issue. And you're wondering, is there ever going to be a middle ground? Are we ever going to meet in the middle somewhere? And what's the story? And tonight I was thinking about this. It's like, well, what is the story anyway? Like, what is the point of all this, right? I mean, if you're going to be so entrenched in different viewpoints or different aspects of something that it's going to be a Romeo and Juliet kind of situation, then what is the point? I certainly don't want to end up dead like Romeo and Juliet did, because you think there's no hope and you're just going to, go poison yourself. I'm not planning on doing that ever. And I certainly hope that no one else would either. It's not that kind of a world anymore, right? I mean, we live in a kind of a world where hopefully you can find some middle ground. And just because your families are at war with each other or your employers are at war with each other or whatever, doesn't mean that you can't find an agreement somewhere and some kind of sense in it. But it hit me tonight and it just kind of floored me. And it's not really like the happy ending that most people would want, but I got it, right? So the intense connection is there because you are supposed to be on different sides of the issue. That is the story. That is your story, right? So I like irony. Irony kind of makes me laugh. So that's extremely ironic. That is a story. You're not going to end up necessarily finding any middle ground and happily riding off into the sunset. The story is of you and this other person having a connection in spite of the dramatic differences between your political agendas or personal agendas or corporate agendas or whatever, business agendas, right? I've always found myself on the opposite side of some kind of a great political divide with my soulmates. Sometimes the soulmates are married, but you don't have to end up romantically with your soulmates. A soulmate can be somebody who's just there to teach you a very valuable, life lesson. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to end up marrying them or riding off into the sunset and, starting a ranch in Wyoming or something. It just means that you are supposed to learn something from that person and you are supposed to interact with them meaningfully while you're trying to learn these lessons together. And it's not like you're going to be having dinner together every night. It's like you're working on some kind of issue and you're learning lessons from that person and from that issue. So that's the story. And that's why I continue to be deliberately single, because I'm not going to, settle for anything that is that contentious. And often these soulmates are married. So you're not going to do anything with them anyway. I'm not going to be involved with somebody who goes home to someone else every night. But also, I'm not going to be involved with somebody whose political persuasions or business agenda is so dramatically different from mine that you're literally working hard against that person on both sides of a very big divide. So there's that, maybe one day somebody will cross my path and there will not be a great political divide between myself and that person. Maybe the lesson will be to work together and not against each other, but have a connection anyway. That would be nice because, again, the last 6 really intense connections I've had have been with, incredibly amazing men who were on the other side of a great political divide or issue from mine. And there's this intense connection and you're just like, well, when is the story going to begin? And then it hits you, oh yeah, this is the story, right? That is the story. It's the Romeo and Juliet situation, but without, Romeo and Juliet getting married and then killing each other or killing themselves. Did they kill each other? No. They both took poison, but they gave it to themselves, I think. I don't remember. Anyway, something like that. Something really horrible and awful that nobody wants to end up in. And I certainly wouldn't ever go that far just for one guy. Unless it was Tom Brady, of course. I will put all of my rules and regulations aside for Tom Brady. But unless it's Tom Brady, then no, I'm not going to go drink poison just for some random guy with a connection, Anyway, so the story is the connection, even if you're working against each other. That's the story, folks. That's about as good as it's going to get with a soulmate who crosses your path for no apparent reason other than to work against you in some way while experiencing a super strong sort of soul connection. But the story is the two of you working against each other and learning something in the process. That's the story. It's not going to end up like Romeo and Juliet, I hope. And they didn't have a happy ending anyway. So there you go. That's my deep thoughts for tonight. And now I'm going to proceed with watching one of my favorite new shows. And I'm going to probably binge watch it until about 1 a.m. because it's 11:30 now. So I have about an hour and a half. All right. That's my insight for the evening.